Good evening. Welcome to the 2021 Milton Speaks Candidates Forum series. My name is Michael Lynch, Executive Director for Milton Access Television, and I will act as tonight's moderator. This year, we are hosting the annual Candidates Forum over a series of nights in March and April leading up to the election, taking place on Tuesday, April 27th. Tonight, we will hear from the Select Board candidates. The candidates were contacted through the Town Clerk's Office as well as MATV for participation in these forums. Candidates were not provided the questions or subject matter before tonight's debate. Tonight's questions will be asked by Ms. Elaine Carroll of the Milton Times, Mr. Ralph Destin and Mr. Anderson Corman, both captains of the MHS debate team, and Mr. Alex McGetrick, a freshman member of the team. We also solicited questions from the public. If you don't hear your question being asked, it may be part of another question or a repeat question from a member on the panel. Now I'll go over the format for tonight's forum. Each candidate will be allowed a 90-second opening statement. Questions from the candidates will then be asked by members of the panel. Each candidate will be allowed a 90-second response to each question. The order of the first question will be alphabetical by last name, and the order will change for each subsequent question. There will be a 1-minute closing statement offered to each candidate, and the order will be chosen randomly. There will be no rebuttals. I will signal when the candidates have 15 seconds remaining to wrap up their answer. I ask the candidates to finish your thoughts at this time and bring your responses to a close. Tonight's forum will feature the Select Board candidates. They are incumbent Mr. Michael Zulis and candidate Mr. Philip Johanning. Each candidate was asked to submit a brief bio to read this evening, which I will do now, starting with Mr. Michael Zulis. Mike has served the town on the Warrant Committee, the School Committee, as a town meeting member, and for the past 3 years as a member of the Select Board. Mike currently sits on the Select Board's Finance Committee, the board's representative on the School Building Committee, and is chair of the Municipal Broadband Committee. A lawyer and a former public corruption prosecutor, Mike lives on Fairbanks Road with his wife, Marianne, and their daughters, Melina, who attends the Pierce Middle School, and Alyssa, who attends the Cunningham Elementary School. And now to Mr. Johanning. Phil Johanning has lived in Milton for the past 12 years with his husband. He spent his 40-plus year career managing large financial operations, primarily for Fortune 500 companies, and recently for small startup Boston area firms. Phil believes that he will bring a more financially disciplined perspective to the Select Board if given the opportunity to represent them by Milton voters on April 27th. And now we will begin with the forum. We will start with opening statements. As I stated first, the first opening statement will be by Mr. Johanning, and you have 90 seconds. Mr. Johanning, your opening statement, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Johanning. I believe firmly in Prop 2.5, which has been the law of the Commonwealth for the past 40 years. It's a law that we in Milton have tended to override. We've created new taxes like the stormwater fee, the community preservation fee. But I believe that for the protection of the budgets of the families who live in Milton, we have to learn to live within our means. That's all I have to say, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. And now to Mr. Zulis, your opening statement. Mr. Zulis, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you to Mike Lynch and MATV and to the Milton Times and to the Milton High School debate team representatives and to Phil for joining me in this race. It has been my great honor to serve on the Select Board for the past 3 years. Whether you're a school parent or a senior, whether you live in East Milton, on Blue Hill Avenue, or in any of Milton's wonderful neighborhoods, I've been proud to stand up for you on issues such as out-of-scale 40B developments, airplane traffic equity, and helping to negotiate contracts that have saved the town more than $2 million. While we have faced challenges, we've worked together as a community, we've met those challenges, and we've achieved many successes. Together, we've been able to get things done. For example, On the site where the old dilapidated Henry's building sat for decades, housing and commercial spaces are being built. We plan to rebuild our 3 fire stations to provide for our firefighters, to protect our residents without raising taxes. And we created a youth center, which was sorely needed for our tweens and our teens. And again, we did that at cost. We've also shown during the COVID-19 pandemic over this past year that we can respond effectively to crisis. I run for re-election because there is still more to do. I am committed to focusing on the important issues that will affect life in Milton for years to come. These include affordable housing, overcrowding in our schools, the needs of our seniors, equity, and a municipal broadband network. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Zulus. We will now get into the question part of our forum. The first question will come from MHS debate team captain, Mr. Ralph Destin, and will be directed toward Mr. Johanning. Mr. Destin.
Select board, my bad. The select board is responsible for many of the appointments within town government. How will you ensure that the officials you hire represent the diversity of viewpoints and socioeconomic backgrounds of the town?
That is something that I have been concerned about as a resident for quite a while. I have offered my services to the warrant committee. I have not been chosen. I have offered my services to the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. I have not been chosen. Despite my background and despite my experience with airplane noise with the Fair Skies Boston group, I have never had the opportunity to be chosen for these positions that were available. And I feel the pain of people who have been excluded from being part of our town government and town committees. And it is my intention to be sure that people who are not necessarily, I'll say part of an in crowd in Milton, are fully represented in town government and town committees. I think it's wrong for someone who has experience, appropriate experience, to be excluded. I feel that, and I would not do it.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning, for your response. Mr. Zulus, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph, for the question. I'm actually very proud of the diversity of individuals that we've been able to attract to participate in town government over the last 3 years. I think you can see that our warrant committee that is appointed by our moderator, Bob Hiss, has undergone a much more diverse viewpoints over the last few years. We've had, as select board appointees for our traffic mitigation committee, we had the former transportation secretary for the Commonwealth, Jeff Mullen, as the chair. We have as our MCAC representative, one of the most distinguished lawyers in Boston over the last 30 years, Tom Doherty. And I think I'm most proud of the appointments we've made over the last year to our Equity and Justice for All committee. We have just an outstanding group of individuals, including the former CFO of the United Way. We have bank presidents, including Frank Davis and Quincy Miller from Eastern Bank. We have people who were in business. We have Jenna Lucas, who is a retired professor of social work. So the diversity of views and opinions that we have in the Equity and Justice for All committee, which is one of the things that I proposed and passed last summer, is, I think, a source of great strength, and it is bringing more people into town government, and that's what we need. We've seen a lot of activity, a lot of people interested, and that's a great thing for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. The next question will come from Mr. Alex McGetrick. It will be directed toward Mr. Zulus.
Local government is often overlooked due to the belief that it has very little power. If elected, what are your primary policy goals and how would these directly benefit the people of the town?
So thank you, Alex. I actually think the proximity of town government makes it more critical to the everyday lives of the residents of the town. And the things that I see as most important over the next 3 years are finishing the work to rebuild our fire stations. And we'll have a ballot question on that on April 27th on Election Day. And I support the ballot question, yes on one, and I hope people will vote to support our fire stations and to rebuild our fire stations. Again, we're not raising taxes to do it. We're able to plan well and to figure out a way not to raise taxes in order to rebuild our fire stations. Our firefighters deserve it. I think addressing overcrowding in our schools is another critical issue over the next 3 years. And I've had the opportunity, and I will continue if I'm reelected, to serve on the school building committee, responding to affordable housing needs and to the surfeit of 40B developments is another critical issue for the long term of Milton. There are a few other things that I think are critical as well. I think implementing the recommendations of our traffic mitigation committee that will help automobile traffic in town, implementing the recommendations when they come of our advisory committee on equity and justice for all. We need to expand our real estate credit for seniors, real estate tax credit for seniors, and we're going to have that will come up in town meeting, and I hope we can pass that. We need to continue to advocate for air traffic relief, and finally, we need to prepare Milton for the future, and that's what I see as the critical need of the Municipal Broadband Committee, to prepare our infrastructure for the connectivity needs of the future. So those are some of the things that I think are important over the next 3 years, Alex.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Zullis, for your response. Mr. Johanning, you have 90 seconds.
Alex, I think that your question is incredibly important because our local needs are the most important to us every day of our lives. So providing excellent schools, educating young people in our town, providing for the basic services that we all enjoy is incredibly important. When I see issues on the national news, I think that they don't really relate to my life, but the things that go on in Milton are very relevant to my life. And so I think if there's someone who believes that town government or town issues are unimportant, I think they would be wrong. But in fact, as I said in my opening comments, we have to live within our means. And I would like to see the fire stations rebuilt, but I do not agree with debt exclusion. I believe that is, in effect, making me responsible for debt of the town. That makes every individual, every taxpayer, responsible for the debt of the town. It means that it's not within the bounds of Prop 2.5, and I don't support it.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning, for your response. The next question will come from Ms. Carroll at the Milton Times, and it will be directed toward Mr. Johanning first. Ms. Carroll, your question.
Well, most people agree that airplane noise solutions lie ultimately with the FAA. What can be done locally?
Elaine, I believe that all we can do is advocate for our position with our congressman and encourage him to advocate for our position with the head of the FAA and the Secretary of Transportation. We have had meetings in town with Representative Lynch. I believe we need to have at least annual meetings with Representative Lynch. I think we have to officially invite Representative Lynch to come and talk about what he has actually accomplished within the last year to help us. It is a national issue, and we don't have a lot of ability to influence what's going on. But I do think that holding our local federal representatives, our senators, our representative accountable to us by asking them to meet with us on an annual basis would be an excellent idea. It pushes them to keep this issue front and center in their minds.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. Mr. Zulus, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you for the question, Elaine. Phil's right about advocacy, and he's right about working with our representatives in Congress. And that's what we've tried to do over the last 3 years. Our efforts have been centered on advocacy and also consensus building with local communities. We partnered with the Boston City Council in airplane traffic efforts. We've advocated with the local organizations, the MCAC, and with Massport. We've advocated with the FAA against supersonic traffic regulations that they were proposing. We've conducted public forums to get the ideas and the concerns of the residents and to respond to any questions they've had. We've worked with as I said, we worked with the Massport MCAC. And finally, as Phil pointed out, we've built consensus with Congressman Lynch and Senator Timilty and Representative Driscoll and Boston City Councilors Andrea Campbell and Ricardo Arroyo. We've built consensus with them on our opposition to the Runway 4L environmental assessment. So we've made some progress over the last 3 years. There's a lot more to do. And as for inviting Congressman Lynch, he's been invited. I know that he intends to do it. COVID has limited some of the opportunities to do that, but I fully expect that Congressman Lynch will be here as soon as it's allowable under the COVID. As soon as things open up a little bit. We've had as everyone knows, more restrictions in the last year, and that's kind of prevented some of the things that we'd hoped in terms of meetings. So,
thank you, Mr. Zulus. That concludes round one of questioning. Now on to round two. The first question will again come from Mr. Destin and will be addressed to Mr. Zulus first. Mr. Destin, your question.
If elected, how would you promote civic involvement and education, not just in Milton's youth population, but among those that don't historically participate in town politics?
Yeah, it's a good question, Ralph, and something that we've been concerned about. I know the town clerk has been concerned about it in the past. The good news is we have a lot more involvement recently, and I think it's through the efforts of the town clerk to try to get the word out, to try to promote things, through the efforts of our board to try to promote things and get the word out. We have several races for town meeting member this April, where there are 14 and 16 people running for 10 slots, which is extraordinary and wonderful. We've got very active races for planning board and school committee and here on the select board. So we're getting more civic engagement. What's important to me is access, Ralph, and I think there are communities in Milton that haven't always had the access, and that's what we're trying to open up. And I think my hope is that kind of access gets opened up in part by our Equity and Justice for All committee. I think that's an important element of that, and reaching out through communication. Communication can always be better. We've tried to make it better over the last 3 years, but there's more that we can do. But I think the key is communication, getting the word out, and access. And that's what I would try to do over the next 3 years and continue what we've been doing over the past 3.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Mr. Johanning, your response?
Ralph, I hope you'll run for office. Ralph, I think that Alex brought up an interesting question about the importance of town and local government. And I hope that people do understand the importance to our lives of local town government, school committee. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the idea that town government isn't important is what demotivates people, or maybe they believe that they can't make a difference. And I think that would be a wrong assumption. I think we have to continue to show that town government is important. Imagine the school committee, Ralph. How important the school committee has been in your life, the opportunities that you've been given along with all your fellow students. wouldn't it be great for you to participate on the school committee? I'd encourage you to run. As soon as you have the time to be able to do that, you should run. I think it's important, but I think every individual has to feel the need and has to respond to the need. Thank you, Ralph.
And thank you, Mr. Johanning. The next question will come from Mr. McEtrick, and it will be addressed to Mr. Johanning first. Mr. McEtrick, your next question.
What specific measures could the town pursue in order to meet the financial needs of schools while expanding the tax base? Please elaborate.
Alex, a couple of years ago, I went to the superintendent of schools, Mary Gormley, and I asked her for all of the position descriptions for non-teaching positions in the schools. And I asked her for the salary levels of those positions. My own thought about the schools is that we need more teachers and fewer non-teaching positions. And I guess I believe that the tax base is adequate. I think the problem is that we have too many administrators and perhaps not enough teachers. What I would propose is to encourage the school committee to look carefully at non-teaching positions. The non-teaching positions, you may know, are the higher paid positions. I believe that in re-looking at highly paid non-teaching positions may afford us additional resources to do other things like put more teachers in the classroom. That's what I think about, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. Mr. Zulus, your response?
Yes, thank you, Alex. First, let me say that financially, Milton is a very well-run town. Despite having a small commercial tax base, our single-family tax bill ranks in the middle among our comparable towns. In terms of spending, we rank near the bottom of comparable towns, and the bottom in a good way. And we've been prudent about our debt service. Our percentage of debt to the budget, again, is near the bottom of comparable towns, 13 to 14 or so comparable towns. And this, our strong financial condition is reflected in the fact that we have the highest credit rating possible, AAA, from the firms that rate cities for their financial performance, Moody's and Standard & Poor in New York. And in terms of what we will do for what we need to do for the schools, the budget, I look at the budget in the community as kind of a three-legged stool. On the one hand, you have the services, and people want a certain level of services, and I think people are generally happy with that. On the other hand, they have taxes, and we have to pay the taxes to provide the services. And then you have development. And if you have more commercial development, that can mitigate the taxes that you pay. And so that's always the argument. How much commercial development? How much are your taxes you're going to pay? In terms of specifics for how we're going to provide for a new school and how we're going to provide for additional school needs, the residents of Milton are taxed as much as they want to be. The residents of Milton vote on how much they want to pay. It isn't decided by me. It isn't decided by the select board. It is decided by the residents. And the residents will decide if they want to build a new school and if they want to provide additional funding for the schools.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. We're now on to the final question, which will come from Ms. Carroll at the Times, and it'll be directed toward Mr. Zulus first. Ms. Carroll, your final question.
Under what circumstances and for which projects or needs in towns would you consider supporting a Proposition 2.5 override?
Well, again, thank you, Elaine. Again, it's that balance, right? To the extent that the residents decide, and I as a resident decide that I want a certain level of services, and the costs will not prevent us to provide those services, then I will vote for a Proposition 2.5 override. It's if I think we need more services and the costs are too much. Now, we've been very good since I've been involved in town government since 2009. I was on the warrant committee for 3 years, school committee for 3 years. and now select board for 3 years, we've only had one Proposition 2.5 operational override. That happened to be the year I wasn't in town government. So I think we've been very good. We've been very prudent. We've been very conservative about our budgeting. But if the need arose in the future, I would support it. If we need a school, I would support it. But my bent is to try to budget conservatively, act prudently, and try to act within the constraints and within the budgetary constraints that we have. If it's needed, we'll have to do it. But every year is different in Milton, and we'll see what next year brings. I'm hopeful we'll be able to manage as well as we have in the last few years, and to maintain the level of services in a very prudent way with respect to our budget.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Mr. Johanning, you have 90 seconds.
Okay. Elaine, I couldn't say without knowing the situation whether I would or wouldn't support a Prop 2.5 override. But in general, I've stated I really believe that we have to show some respect for the needs of the families who pay taxes. And so their needs, to me, are more important than the town's needs, let's say. I would defer to their need for their own money as opposed to the town's need for their money. Again, I've looked at the financial statements for the town, and I see that pension and post-retirement benefits are the biggest pressure on our budget. And there's nothing we can do about that. But looking at what we have now in terms of salaries and number of positions in the schools and the town, I would advocate for combining positions as positions are replaced, looking at lower salaries. Our town administrator makes $10,000 less than the mayor of Boston. I think that's rich. I think the salaries may be too high. I think we have to look at the number of positions. I think we have to clean our own house first before we ask others for more money.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. So that concludes the forum part of tonight's event. We will now move into closing statements. Mr. Johanning, you have the first closing statement. You have a minute.
Okay. I am, as I said in the very beginning, and I've said consistently throughout, I want to push for a change in our philosophy in town. I'd like to look for fewer managers, more moderate salaries over time as positions are replaced. Let's consolidate positions. Let's eliminate positions where possible. Let's take that money and put it toward other needs in the town. We may have a AAA position, bond rating, but honestly, as I look at our pension liabilities, which have not been calculated on our financial statements, I believe that we are a town in trouble, and we need to manage those situations going forward. And I believe that we need to start doing that now. So if you believe that you have dedicated enough of your resources to town government, and you would like to see town government managed in a sharper fashion, I ask you to vote for me on April 27th.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johanning. Mr. Zulus, your closing statement. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you again to Mike and MATV, and to the Milton Times, and to the members of the debate team, Phil, and to you for listening. I believe we do have a clean house, and I do believe we do have a sharp focus, and I believe we have budgeted conservatively while still providing for the needs of the residents of the town. The town is the residents. There is no town on one side and residents on the other. The town is the residents, and I believe we provided services. Now, nearly a year ago, when I served as chair of your select board, the COVID-19 crisis upended our lives and tossed us into uncharted territory. But I could not have been more proud of the way we came together as a community. Town government was immediately reimagined, and we never missed a beat. Our town departments and schools, our health professionals, our first responders, our businesses, our nonprofits, and MATV all came together as one, united against a common goal. Our response to the pandemic showed the spirit of our community, the spirit of Milton. We need to keep that spirit alive and find new opportunities and meet the new challenges of the next 3 years. If given the opportunity, I'll use my experience to help find those opportunities and meet those challenges. I'd like to keep working with you and for you, and I ask for your vote on April 27th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. And thank you to all the candidates for participating this evening. That concludes our forum. I'd like to offer a big virtual round of applause to all of our candidates tonight. I'd like to remind everyone that our annual town election is scheduled for April 27th. Please check out our website for a message from the town clerk regarding early voting and the town's commitment to keeping the voting process safe with regards to COVID-19. If you have any questions regarding the election, your precinct location, or if you registered to vote, please contact the town clerk's office at 617-898-4859. I'd like to thank our panel this evening again, Ms. Elaine Carroll from the Milton Times, Mr. Ralph Destin from the MHS debate team, as well as Mr. Alex McGetrick from the debate team. I'd like to thank our candidates, Mr. Michael Zulus and Mr. Philip Johanning, for accepting our invitation and participating in the forum tonight. Our next forum is Monday, April 12th at 7 p.m. and will feature the school committee candidates. Thank you again for participating tonight. Thank you to the viewers at home for watching. I hope everyone has a pleasant evening.